which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Ackroyd, roll call, please.
Mr. Stahl?
Here.
Mrs. Reed?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell? Here. Mr. Myers?
Here.
Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Dr. Krebs? Here. Mr. Birchfield?
Here. Okay, we have a full board tonight. Approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Mr. Trombley, supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? We are going to, one add here is we are going to have a curriculum update, and that'll be added to, under the superintendent report, thank you. And that'll be added moving forward under the super report on a bi-weekly basis. Okay. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Dr. Gray, Shining Stars.
Yeah, we begin tonight with teacher Jennifer Evans, if she'd stand up, please. She was nominated for a Shining Star Award. She spent her spring break putting positive affirmations on the bathroom walls at Scranton. She cut them out with her CRI
Cricket.
Cricket. Okay. Never seen that before. And hit them to the walls. They're incredible. I know they've gotten a lot of positive feedback. She's been helped extensively by teacher Molly Urbane. She'd stand as well. And Miss Urbane has also been nominated for a Shining Star Award. I guess it's messages on a bathroom stall or in a bathroom, but any of that stuff is very helpful. We appreciate you taking your own time to do that, and we know, and I've worked with you for a long time now, how much you guys care about kids. So thank you for the extra effort. You don't get paid for it. You don't get anything for it, but we'd like to give you a little Shining Star Award. So if you please come up and accept it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You created your own destiny.
Yeah.
Would you bring it up so they can see the pictures?
Yeah, is it easier to?
I don't know if I have the ability to do that here. I just want you guys to see them.
We were actually, we were up there 5 hours yesterday and fixed them, or finished them, so they're all done. So we ended up doing, I think, 34, 35 doors and walls, so they're all, yes. So we have a couple, we have one to repair that from the boys' bathroom that was strategically, some stickers from words were strategically removed. So we have one to repair and then we're missing a Y. They're all posted. They're on an album. It's Scranton's Facebook page. And just ask Wilson. He knows about creating your own destiny very well.
Again, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Molly. And you don't have to stay because you're going to have to get up early to work. So.
I'm waiting for my call. Yeah.
Keep waiting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
That's all we have.
This brings us to call to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board, please step forward, state your name, address, and we ask that you limit comments to 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, we will close call to the public and move to our superintendent report. Item A, student rep, and
I didn't ever come in just because the roads are kind of bad, younger drivers. So.
Yep.
Thought better of that, but we do have Ms. Liz Mosier for the second part of it, and she's going to give us a quick update on kind of a 10,000-foot view of what we're working on presently.
So I was asked to kind of give an overview of what we're working on in curriculum. I broke it up into curriculum, instruction, and assessment, which are the 3 areas that we tend to look at. So starting with curriculum, which is what we teach in science. We did an update in September on science, so I think you have an idea of where we're at with that. But right now, we're continuing to build and train on the units, the K-8 units for our science implementation. And we're also planning in the development of the JK Science to create that alignment. One piece in here, there's some pilots going on, mentioned last time at the high school in chemistry, biology, and physics as well, in regards to their resources. Social studies. Right now, the standards are sitting out there, whether or not they're going to be approved yet. That's still going through the state on their approval process. But social studies is eager to look at some new textbooks and pilot items in that. I've met with the Scranton group, specifically in the 5-6 building as well. A little bit with the high school as well about doing some curriculum mapping and starting to align their curriculum both horizontally and vertically. So that's where you see the mapping would be their horizontal within their grade level, and then the alignment would be vertically. So that way, that's going all the way through a student's kind of time here. And then the C3 framework is what the new curriculum is based off of. So C3 is college, career, and civic life. That's what it stands for. I'll talk more about the framework when I get to the instruction part. But a big part of that is also aligned with ELA and literacy. So it's embedded into that curriculum piece as opposed to having to do it separate. They've attended some meetings at Oakland schools with other social studies groups to kind of get prepping for the new standards and new curriculum that they'll be implementing eventually. Math, the biggest thing right now, quite small because they've been kind of going along, but is reviewing the alignment. So we've been looking at some data specifically at the transition years for 5, 6, and 7, 8, and noticing where we want to work on some alignment pieces for what students are coming to the building with. So that's happening. In ELA, again, reviewing alignment. So again, looking at some data pieces, we're noticing some pieces between 5, 6, 7, 8. So when a student, every time they transition, we're looking at those pieces to see how that travels for students as they go through the system here. We're looking at implementing the curriculum consistently, and so that's on there specifically because we have what they call MESA units, which is a curriculum. We also adopted Lucy Cofton units here, and we're going to get everybody on the same page. So that's why that is listed there. And then the literacy essentials are on there because that's just good essential practices in literacy that go across all curricular areas. So that's something else we're working on, and I'll talk more about that in instruction as well. And then world language, they are piloting something, which you guys know last year you approved that pilot. They'll be looking for a recommendation for their pilot soon, but with that they also have some curriculum mapping and alignment work to do. So in the big sense of what we teach, there's a lot of moving parts right now in some of those areas. In the instruction part, which is how we teach, so the social studies, there's some professional learning going on in that C3 framework, which again is inquiry-based, it's problem-solving, and it's fun engagement. So it's increasing the rigor for students and what we want them to do in social studies versus just knowing dates, knowing things that have happened, but applying those to now, making comparisons. So that's a lot of the work that's being done there. Science, the continued professional learning on that phenomenon-based science. So again, that was in that update originally. And again, looking at investigating, reflecting, and then inquiry-based for students again. So this is really a shift in teaching for most people because we used to kind of tell students what they need to know, and now we're asking students to kind of work through their problems to figure out what they need to know. So both of these are going to be a shift for educators and students. ELA is the Readers Writers Workshop, so again, something that's been adopted here for a long time. But we are going to kind of reboot that, again, creating that consistency K-8 for Readers Writers Workshop. So we are working on planning year-round training to help support teachers in that implementation. And then the literacy essentials work. So we had been part of a group with Livingston County. Dr. Gray was part of that, along with all of our elementary principals. And we've been doing some instructional rounds. So it's not the same idea where a teacher does the learning and comes back and reflects, but more from a district standpoint of where do we need to improve literacy overall, and then help support teachers as we move on. And then that includes the professional learning. And we're going to try to implement some of those already, going into each of the buildings, including multi. So we're going to add our 5-6 building to that. And then assessment, I put 3 of them up there, which is the social studies, the world language, and science. The biggest thing right now is developing balanced assessments. So when we say balanced, We're talking about their formative assessments, so our quick checks along with their summative or CQEs at the high school. And we want to look at the second part, which is adding the rigor of depth of knowledge. So getting away from asking what we consider recall questions, but into application-based questions, and looking at how we assess students overall. And I put the 3 up there because those are all the ones going through the curriculum mapping. In September, when I talked about the process for our curriculum, that is one of the parts of it, is having that assessment piece, making sure it aligns. The other assessment piece is we have NWA, which I think this is, some buildings it's their second year, others I think they're starting their 3rd year. And that's where we look at student growth over time. So they start by assessing themselves, get assessed, and then we look at individual growth for students and seeing how they grow. So is our instruction changing to meet each student's needs? And that's also a good indicator sometimes on the MSTEP, which is the state assessment. So it's kind of like the big picture overview. I know it's a lot, but if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer some. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the state is looking at new standards for social
Correct.
studies.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've got a good solid understanding of what direction they're going to take so that our planning is tied to that, or are you concerned we're going to have to shift?
So they're not major shifts that are out there, but they've been controversial. So it's kind of wait and see until that adoption takes place. They were planned to go last summer, and now who knows? With new legislators, I don't know if it'll be quicker or not. So a lot of, like, the instruction part, you can do anytime, right? Because that's just how we teach, even if the standards are the same. It's just good practices. So that's why we're starting with how we teach that material. I would say we are getting ready, so if there are shifts, it's in the U.S. history items, so it's like a 5th grade and 8th grade probably issue, and some items from 9th grade, or what we would consider world history, I think we teach that in 10th grade here, would get pushed down into the middle school. So we know where it's going to probably end up, we just don't have that, the concrete yet. And so it'll be a rollout, because when the state does this, they don't say you have to do it next year, it's a slow rollout. So you'll have time to get on board.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With our coaches that we have on staff now,
Sure.
and this stuff progressing in social studies, do you think we're adequately prepared staff-wise for that? Or do you see a need to have more coaches or anything like that?
Specifically in social studies or just
Well,
overall?
just overall.
So I would probably say no. Greg and I have been talking a lot about coaches and roles and seeing where if we need some and some support and where we might be able to move some others around. So we haven't finalized anything, but I wouldn't say we need more at the present time.
Okay.
It's type of the way they have the kids more engaged now. Does that fall into the new competency style that they keep talking about? The competency-based teaching and it sounds like it. It
Yeah.
sounds a lot like it.
So teaching is just shifting, and it's difficult. So science right now in our district, it is difficult for teachers to shift, right? And so it's harder because it's not about getting the answer, it's about how you're getting the answer. I mean, that's really what's happening. So, and it's different because teachers are content experts, right? And so they want to tell you, like, this is, this is going to be it. And now we're like, help them get that. So it's difficult. It's a shift.
With the new mapping and new curriculum for social studies in particular, are you expecting a big change to our budget for materials for this coming school year?
So, no, not necessarily. So one of the things that I've been, one of the ways that I see things a little bit more is that I really don't want to put resources before the curriculum. So what happens when we do that is we use the resource as curriculum versus saying what resource supports the curriculum. So I'm working on shifting that here, which is different. So it'll take a little time, but there's a couple groups. ELA had wanted some books, and I said, well, let's look at the curriculum mapping first. So they're kind of going back and slowly but surely they'll look at that process. But really you should have your curriculum set and then find which resources support it. So sometimes it might be more than one, but less. Both social studies groups are looking at open source, so books that are available online and free of charge. So it just depends what they need.
Thank you.
If you're, it's probably been, what, 8 months now?
It's only 6. But
6
it's
months, 6 to 8 months. Okay. All right, I'm not trying to fast forward.
It's okay, it feels like that.
What's your general assessment of the curriculum area right now in terms of just a general takeaway of where we sit and some areas that you feel we might need to put some further attention into?
So I'm a systems person, so my biggest thing that I would like to put forth that I've been working on with the coaches, so Kim Hubert, Wendy O'Keefe, and Chris Garkowski, fabulous, is really creating that system of rotation of when we review our curriculum. So that to me is more important. So knowing the history of the deficit and coming out of that. So once we get a system, you'll always know what's coming next, and you'll kind of be prepared for that for 5, 6 years down the road. So it doesn't rely on a person being here, but it relies on the document that's constantly and continuously updated. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is to have that system in place. And it's not based off textbooks, but it's based off a review of the curriculum, including resources being one of those things. So that would probably be the big picture item that I would love to have in place, that I've been working on having in place. And I just think the other thing is looking at transitions and how we can always help streamline a student as they move through the system K-12. But I think that's normal. I mean, that's just a difficult thing to do.
And there was a follow-up to Mr. Bursto's question. So the systemization is obviously an important objective from your perspective. I take it that's not going to be a short-term achievement. That's going to be something that's going to take some time. In terms of just like looking in the next year, 2019, what do you see as any challenges or obstacles from a curriculum standpoint that if there are any, maybe, from your perspective, kind of looking forward in the short term, that should be on our radar, or things that perhaps we should devote as a board attention to?
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not really, the biggest thing for me is supporting our teachers and the professional learning around teachers, around instructional practices that are going to change. So really what's happening is teachers are being pulled out of their comfort zone. It is what it is because of the level of instruction we're asking. So the more, that comes both ways, right? Because we don't want to pull them out of class, we want them with students, but we also want to give them the professional learning support. So I think for me, it's really how we can support teachers and continually give them learning around instruction.
So I guess as a follow-up, the biggest changes that we're looking at currently are the changes to the instruction as opposed to the curriculum.
Yeah, social studies, except social studies, which is going to have those new standards that come out maybe in the spring. I don't know for sure. But that's probably the biggest thing. Science, you'll have textbooks eventually for the high school when they kind of go through their process. But most of these groups, they have their curriculum, they're kind of rolling with their resources. So it's more about how we teach our kids now.
Is there anything you need from us when going back to the systems piece of it and getting that implemented or bringing that up to where you want it to be?
So I would say patience. I always invite patience, but the idea that for the system to work, it has to go through those phases. So when you introduce curriculum, it goes through a process and understanding what standards is it aligned to? What else can we possibly give credit for? And doing that legwork is done beforehand and then brought through the process, and then obviously brought to you, which we have a couple of pieces that we're bringing to you anyways, but just the patience of the system. Once it starts rolling, it becomes just part of it, but it takes some time to get that going.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job. All right. This moves us into our 4 action items for this evening. Item A is special meeting minutes of January 9th, 2019. We have a motion to approve. Moved by Mr. Trombley, supported by Mr. Myers. Any discussion? favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? It passes 7-0. Item B is our regular meeting minutes of January 14th, 2019. Do we have a motion?
Support, or motion? Sorry.
Motion by Ms. Reed. Supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item C, donation, change for kids. Dr. Gray.
Again, we recommend that you accept the donation of $2,500 from the State Bank for Change for Kids. This has been a yearly activity now, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years, and we just recommend this with appreciation.
We have a motion to approve. Moved by Mr. Myers,
Support?
supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion?
Who's that money go to? What account and where's it going and what is it?
Nutrition.
Yeah.
Nutrition, yeah, nutrition.
And Dr. Gray, I think last time you mentioned we use these funds to take care of lunch accounts that were otherwise negative.
That's correct.
All right, all those in favor of supporting this donation with great gratitude to the State Bank, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 7-0. Again, special thank you to the State Bank. Item D, MSP, Michigan State Police Grant, Safety and Security Window Film. Dr. Gray.
If you recall, as part of the grant, we looked at 2 different opportunities. One was the reallocation system that we tested last year, and this is the other. This is the security film for the windows, and we'd recommend that you accept and give the award to Templar Life Safety for the bid of $47,425.
Do we have a motion to approve? So moved. Moved by Mr. Stahl, supported by Mr. Myers. Any discussion?
When is this supposed to be installed?
As soon as we can.
Is that like next week?
I don't know weather-wise.
Well, that's my point. I mean, is there,
My goal would be at least spring break, because then nobody's here, and we can really get after the different buildings.
so is that part of the bid or the contract by a certain date it will be installed?
I don't know if there's an actual date, but I know it's as soon as we possibly can, depending on weather and depending on materials.
And then what was the total amount of the grant?
89,000, if I remember correctly.
So there's roughly 42 something
Well,
left.
remember the safety management system is about 20, and that's a quote system because it's not over the bid threshold, so we had to get 3 quotes. And then the remainder of what we have, we're going to expand scope in terms of windows
Got
and doors.
In this, under this.
That's
window
correct.
film.
it, yeah, okay. But again, I'd like to see something in there that has a date that it will be installed by.
We'll check.
Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. We want to get it on as quickly as we can.
Yep.
We just want to make sure it adheres correctly, and I don't know what temperature, I'm not an expert on those, but I don't know what temperature or how long it takes. I'm assuming they can do it in about a week.
Okay.
Have we already received the grant funds, or do we get those after we make the purchases?
I think we draw those down
Yes.
after we,
Yeah, it's
yeah, I
different.
think we draw them down after.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they really give money out of
I can't imagine why.
it. All those in favor, any other discussion, I'm sorry? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item E, school choice for fall of 2019. Dr. Gray.
And we recommend that you approve the unlimited school of choice program for students in grades JK through 12. We'll again be monitoring the percentages not to exceed the 20% scope that we talked about. Actually, we want to keep it about exactly where it is right now in that 16 to 17% range. We have had a lot of interest, not just school of choice. We're seeing a larger interest as well in move-ins, so that's encouraging long-term. As we look at the overall bond piece too, and we take a look at our enrollment projections, we'll be able to continually tell you what that looks like too, but I don't see a big change moving forward.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? So moved by Mr. Stahl.
Support?
I will say support. Supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion?
When we talked about about this at the last meeting, Dr. Gray. You had said that, it bears watching that at some point you can see us moving to a limited school of choice offering. Where do you see that point?
Once we get to that 20%, and if it looks like it's continuing to grow, again, our second semester limited school of choice, the last 2 years has been very encouraging because we've seen 20 times the amount of residents that we've seen school of choice. And again, we don't take very many anyways, so we're just backfilling open slots because it's 10% of the funding as opposed to 90%, which you recall. But our numbers have tracked so consistently, I would say over the last 3 years especially. And again, the biggest grade that we don't know is JKK. That's the biggest one. And to go 485, 486, 486, that's a good long-term number for us when we look at that kindergarten JK class and then transitioning up by the time they graduate as seniors to a 510 to a 525 range. That's a good healthy number for us. That's 6,000 to 6,100 is always our goal. And keeping those percentages right and keeping the building percentages right too. That's what we've worked incredibly hard on. If you remember, probably 5 years ago, Corning was a little bit out of whack in terms of school of choice. And so we've been able to manage that backwards to where it's pretty balanced across the system. But I would just keep an eye on it every single year. I mean, if we went from, I think we're at 16.8 this year district-wide. If we jump to 18.5, boy, there would have, that 2%, that's a big number when you're in 6,000 kids, 6,100 kids. That would, in my opinion, that would need a little more deeper exploration at that point. If we went from 16.8 to 16.9 or 17 or something like that, we're still looking and seeing where they're coming from. But a percent or 1.5% or 2%, that would be a pretty big sweeping change in my opinion. I think we really have to dig in there and see what the problem is. Is somebody around us struggling? Is there a reason? Right now, it's been, again, for the last 3 or 4 years, very, very consistent.
Thank you.
Question on the JK. Do you see a higher percentage of out-of-school kids in there and they're out-of-district kids that then, because you see them talk on the internet about they're looking all over because their school doesn't have enough spaces or they might be coming from things they might be coming.
Yeah.
I wondered if we get a lot and then they drop off when they go to
No, you have to look at the history of this district too. So let's go all the way back to Miller. Okay, if you go all the way back 10 years ago to Miller, when Miller was an existing kindergarten building, JK building alone, you had the largest percentage of school of choice at any grade level than this district's ever had. So it was happening at that point to where I think it was well over 100 kids out of 600 were coming in, taking the 1 year, and then transitioning back to their district. Okay, we're not seeing that trend. We're not seeing that trend with JK. We're not seeing that trend with K. And we're not seeing this, and you can see the percentages. I gave you that paperwork last time. We're not seeing this like boom of 29% in JK that drops to an 18 or a 17 in K or in first grade. We're not seeing that. We're seeing the people that want to come. They like the experience, and they typically tend to transition with us from grade to grade. Now, where we're picking up at the high school level is that transition from 8th grade to the high school level. So we're staying fairly consistent at that 480, 485 all the way through the system until we hit that 9th grade year, and then we get a little spike, and it tends to jump to the 510 or 520, 525 by the time they hit their senior year. Remember too, in that high school number, you got about 22, 24 kids that are consortium kids. So they're with us 2 hours out of the day. So it might look like 80 kids or 100 kids on paper, but you got to knock that number down, to 30%, 20% of that.
Do we track by number of out-of-district kids by their home district?
We do.
Who's what are the top?
Pinckney and Howell would be the top two that we draw from the most. We have a fairly even swap with Heartland in terms of that. Fowlerville is not a big number because proximity. South Lyon, we have some. We have a couple from Ann Arbor, and then we have some weird onesies, twosies. So we have some from Ann Arbor. We have a couple from Birmingham. we have a couple from here, Dexter or whatever, but I don't really put those in my numbers a whole bunch, just, they're in the numbers, but they're not significant because it might be a staff member that works in Dexter, brings their 3 kids here. It might be somebody who lives in Birmingham, but the kids just ride with them, or they came here for a very specific program, typically. You'll see a couple of weird ones with our TPH program, our hockey program, from this place to that place, but then again, we can't make decisions based on those, because it's not a trend, it's not a real number, and those numbers hold pretty solid.
And so does the 16 to 17%, does that include those that are,
It
that
does.
are enrolled in the hockey school?
It does, yeah.
And which, they really don't even have a physical presence in the
We have
buildings.
kids from Canada, we have kids from all over, you know, but, yeah, they're in the number, but to pull them out or put them in, it doesn't sway that number big enough to where it's causing it to go up 2 or 3% or down 2 or 3%. So we run with it because we want to show you a realistic number, but you could probably knock that percentage down 0.5%, 0.75% if you just pulled out consortium kids, you know, and you pulled out TPH kids or something along those lines. That would be 50, 60 kids total. FTEs, not kids, because they're a portion.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item F, certified staff resignation. Dr. Gray.
We recommend you accept the resignation of Chelsea Onstead, 2 years of service to the district as a special ed teacher in multi-intermediate.
We have a motion to approve. Moved by Mr. Myers. Supported by Mr. Trombley. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Again, passes 7-0. Item G, amended budget 2018-19. Dr. Gray.
We recommend as one of your responsibilities that you approve the 2018-19 amended budget as set forth. The only question I had was from Dr. Krebs. We sat and met a little bit about the budget talk. Other than that, we feel comfortable with where we're at present.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? So moved by Mr. Stahl,
Support.
supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. We're on a roll here.
Don't say that out loud.
Keep it going.
It's like saying these kids are really behaving in the
Item H, donation, Unified Champion School from Special Olympics of Michigan.
Yeah, another really cool thing, hope you got a chance to watch that video I sent you, the final cut from ESPN, but this is another donation from Special Olympics of Michigan. We recommend you accept the donation of $1,600. Obviously, it'll go right to our program and continue to push with that. Hopefully, you had a chance to go to the basketball game we had the other day. What an amazing experience, and I know we came out 1 point on the losing end of that one, but there's no losers in that game. There's no losers in that program. I'll also send you an article coming up from Mark Ewell, the head of the MHSAA. Wrote a real nice article about our kids when they went down for the state championships in football, and we had our Project Unify, Team Unify kids participate in a football game prior to the state championships. This was pretty neat. So.
Is the video gone out?
No, I can't release the video yet because we don't know when they're going to release it on there. You know, as soon as I have that, I'll let you know. I'd love to share it. I think it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And I wish I had their budget for editing and all that kind of stuff, or expertise, because I thought it was really well done. But I was kind of.
Are they releasing it as like an ESPN segment, like a sports center? I'm sorry, on a sports center segment, or do we know?
We don't know. Our best guess is that it'll be a web release.
Okay.
And of the 5 schools that they recognize, I believe there's 2 more to go in terms of that recognition ceremony. So we anticipate after those are in the books that they'll do a compilation of all 5 and probably do a web release. We're hoping for a sports center mention. We'll see.
you know if those visits, are they supposed to be this year?
Yes, yep, because they will start recycling, typically about May, they'll start the process for next year in terms of, looking across the country to see who they're gonna recognize.
So we're getting close. So, good.
Yeah.
Good. All right, do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Myers, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item I, Board Policy 3131, which is reduction and recall of teachers. Dr. Gray.
And this is pretty timely as we head into negotiations and we head into budgeting cycles. We don't anticipate reduction or recall. And Ms. Mosier and I have talked a great deal about coaches. We are looking to tweak some of that programming as we head into 1920, but we don't see any real issues with that. This policy is a replacement of our old 3131 and will allow us much more consistency across the board in terms of doing that. So we recommend this.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Reed, supported by Mr. Myers. Any discussion?
I do have one question. Dr. Gray, I know that the policy language that we get with Neola comes with a compliance guarantee of some sort. I assume that because this is not provided by them, it is not covered by that, and we would just need to talk to Prune for maintenance of this section?
That's correct.
Okay.
When Dr. Hallett comes for our next update, we'll share this policy with him as well.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Last item for action tonight, donation, BHS robotics.
Again, along the concept, if you build it, they will come. We'd ask you to accept the donation of $5,000 from First Robotics. The BHS robotics team to be used for competitions and supplies. And this is a big one. This is very helpful to us and adds to the program. And going after another world championship this year. So our hope is that all of these things help. I know they've been working very hard. I actually am tied into their Slack email system now, so I get to see all their updates. And boy, those kids and mentors and teachers put a lot of time in, so I'm looking forward to the results.
Do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Trombley, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion?
Do we still have a robotics coach?
Yes, present.
Is that a long-term?
I don't know. I'd have to talk to him. I think he was thinking about resigning at the end of the season. He resigned earlier in the season, but we'd asked him to stay on through the season.
So it would be at least through the season?
Yeah. As of now.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting this generous donation from First Robotics with great gratitude signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. And once again, very thankful to First Robotics. Okay, that closes for action, moves us into for future action. Item A is new course proposals for 2019 and 20. Guessing this is Ms. Mosier.
So we are going to look for your approval of 2 new courses. We have a DP Computer Science A course and a Project Lead the Way Design and Modeling at Scranton Middle School. Both of the courses have gone through our SILC, started at their building level to get approval, and then through our SILC meeting where they presented there and were voted on. The information is attached around the curriculum standards, their rationale for it, and other items are listed. And that is what we'll look for next, those 2 courses.
So just going back to this whole ROTC thing and wanting to get that as, on the agenda and things like that. And then we come up with these 2 new courses. Again, I'm assuming this has followed the process that's set forth. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, could you please one more time walk me through that process?
So these were brought up from the building level through either teachers or through the administration. So Scranton, obviously, their STEM initiative would look at other Project Lead the Way courses. This is what Project Lead the Way recommended as their next course, which is design and modeling. And then through CTE for computer programming, again, they had a lot of interest in Java, I think is the first one they have, or computer programming principles is what they run. AP computer programming, and this would be the second one. So we're looking to continue that because there was interest both by the teacher and then by students. So it goes through the building level and then through administration's approval, and then they go through filling out the documents of their rationale. That's brought to the committee to vote on. So it's kind of built from the building up through the system and then voted on there to bring here.
And again, that's the course that all courses will follow.
All courses, yes.
Okay.
Now, the only difference would be if the course was already in existence, didn't run a particular year, and then came back, they wouldn't go through that
I see.
process again.
Okay.
Because they've already done that. Unless the course was changing dramatically, like a rework in terms of the curriculum, or the social studies is a really good example tonight.
New resources.
New resources, those would come through, but if it was marketing 5 that had been run for 2 years, and then we filtered some kids through and didn't have enough to run it, and for a year it didn't go, and then came back as a marketing 5 because there were 30 kids that wanted it the next year, that would not come back through this process.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask about the AP course?
Sure.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So we have a staff proposing it, then does this mean that it's Michelle Costa? Is she then
Correct.
qualified to teach it?
Yes.
Is that the
Yep,
other
she
thing?
teaches currently our other AP course. The other part is this is part of career and tech ed, so there's a potential to get funding for these courses.
Thank you.
Added cost funding.
Okay.
We're always looking for the courses that the state's ranking in the top 10, so that we can get the added cost funding. If you remember last year, the CNC machine that we brought in was paid for out of added cost funds because it tied right into one of the top 10 classes that they were refunding for.
Is the thought that the AP computer science class would be primarily marketed towards those students who went through the initial programming, or is this an entirely separate track?
So great question. Actually, she said that they can take either or. So you don't need one for the other, because one is a principles and then this is computer programming A, and it sounds like they learn different material. So you don't need one for the other. So you could enroll in both or enroll in one.
That's been a trend lately too, is more singleton type classes, especially for AP offerings, because when you get prerequisites in these, not all these have prerequisite tracks. You lock kids into their electives, which a lot of times causes them to not take that track all the way through. So a singleton AP like this will probably always fill, because it's another opportunity where kids didn't have to take 2 or 3 classes prior to getting ready.
I'll just add on to President Birchfield. Our students take this AP Computer Science A, Java language on MBS current. Now we go offer a class. We prefer to offer our classes live versus do the online.
Another follow-up on this, is there then a B to it, or is that the
No.
A doesn't have any bearing
No,
on?
the A doesn't even.
I'm not sure what it's
on it.
Okay.
Well, is it like, I know for AP calculus, there's Calc AB and Calc VC, so.
This
it's
isn't
not-
like that.
Okay.
There's computer, and I'll look more into the college board on how they have it, but they have computer programming A, and then they have computer programming principles, I think is the other one. So those are the 2 courses.
And so for the Scranton, the design and modeling class, students that would take that, would that better prepare them then for certain classes at the high school level? Whether it be the engineering, whether it be some of the other, or is it, does it just give them an exposure to this curriculum that they can kind of see if it's something they like or not like, and then perhaps go into a different direction in high school, or? What's
That's kind of the concept of middle school anyways, is all exploratory.
Sure.
So we try to get as many pieces in front of them as we can, so that when they hit the high school level, they know where to kind of guide their classes. So I used to teach an exploratory class at a 6, 7, 8 building, And our whole team, that's what it was set up for, and it was on a rotational basis. That's why it was quicker rotations. You're not sitting in there for a year, sitting in there for 9 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks, depending on what you're rotating through. And it should spark an interest. So I don't know, it probably would be somewhat of a building block, but it's really about exposing them to the different opportunities. And maybe they, you know, middle school kids are middle school kids, but maybe it leads them in that direction of, I really like that engineering piece. I'm gonna take engineering 1 with, or architectural design with Matt Jordan and see what it's all about.
And so what is the expectation, or is there an expectation for when this is rolled out in terms of the numbers? I mean, do we have any idea of the numbers of students that might be interested in taking this course, or is it just premature at this point to?
I think it would be one section stuff.
Yeah, I think that would be, and they did kind of ask students who would be interested, so they did find out some information on that, and that, so those based off Project Lead the Way saying this is your next one, in addition to saying that they had told me that some students were obviously interested in looking at this as the next option.
So, was that a survey that was sent out?
I don't know, I'd have to ask Mr. Wilson about that, just based off the information from him.
Because if it was, again, I'd like to see what the results of that were.
Okay.
Going back to the programming, and I'm asking because I'm pretty fascinated with this whole topic, and I think it's an area that the sky's kind of the limit. Is it, so Mr. Vecchione, you're mentioning that it is currently is a program that's online, that they can take online. Are there other, and now we're going to bring it in live. Are there other programming courses that we're running that are online right now? I guess I guess my question is, in a nutshell, how many computer programming courses are we running, and then demand of where this is going to project out, you know, what kind of future we have in this space?
We currently run, don't quote me on the number, probably 3 or 4 singleton courses, like basic level introductory courses, like web design, advanced social media. We have a programming class. Our AP, we now have 2 sections of it, of the AP Computer Principles. And then we have probably a handful of kids each semester take the one online, because again, it's fitting into their own schedule. And then students can take some programming classes through the consortium. So they offer a block there as well, a little bit different focus. I think our kids are demanding it more. It's just finding space and keeping them in our board. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's just a.
I'd say the demand too is becoming more specific. So in my daughter's in the architectural engineering class, we're changing our software all the time to meet industry standard. We brought in the CNC lathe down in our other class at $37,000 to meet industry standard, because that's what the industry is telling us that these kids need to prepare to work on. And I would say this is a class just like that. Java is a very specific computer programming piece that we're hearing that our kids need to be trained on. So that's, as we referenced earlier, the constant movement of these classes. If we just, and I think Liz's point is very well taken, if you're just buying textbooks to buy textbooks, that's kind of a waste of money. And we just need to constantly be assessing the environment and then seeing what's being utilized and then changing or tweaking our curriculum to meet that.
So are online classes required to be taken in the classroom?
No. So we have 600 online classes?
We have approximately 300 students taking about 500 enrollments.
So we have a help center. Lynette Daggs in there. We have one other teacher too, where if kids need help, they come in and they meet in the classroom and check in on their progress, and she sends out emails all the time. But if they can do it on their own too, they do it on their own. I would recommend, I know you're just a 4th grader now, but and as she gets to the high school, take one class online. I had both my kids do it, because what an experience, because they're going to do it in college. And it's different managing an online class than it is managing a hybrid class or managing a sit and get type class with a lecture. And so we tell kids all the time to take that class and experience it on our dime instead of when you get to college and aren't really prepared for it. We've seen a lot of success. That's why our numbers have climbed dramatically. And Ms. Dag and I can't remember the other teacher, but
Mr. Walter.
Mr. Walton, you get weekly updates from them on your percentage as you go along. And so you can't, not that you can't, but you shouldn't wait with 5% of the class done until the last week and then do 95% of the last week. That's not managing it very well. We have to change eligibility for sports too.
I've heard some horror stories.
You know, to say you can't keep 5%, because in any other class, if you're trying to stay eligible and you have 5% of the class, you can't stay eligible. So that's been a growing pain for some kids too, but the consistent work on it, I think is
To add on to, if they're not required to attend the online lab except for the first couple of weeks, if they fall behind, we pull them back in.
yes.
So we have some pieces in place to make sure they stay.
Okay.
Well, and I think Lynette has won the Michigan Virtual Teacher Award 2 or 3 times, and it's totally based on completion and grade of classes. So online doesn't have the greatest history of successful completion, and she's had the highest in the state for,
We're in the mid-90s every year, 96% of
which
passes.
is really high for online class, really high for online classes. Typically, you're much lower. So I think it's the way we built it that is helped maintain.
It is very impressive how successful we've been, and it's great to see that we're taking the information we get from that source on what our students are interested in to impact what we're going to offer in a live classroom setting. I think that's a great use of that online tool to help guide, what we need to offer in the classrooms.
Great. Anything else? All right. Thank you. Item B is junior ROTC program. I believe we, at the last meeting, had provided some guidance, and this will be a standing item for some time. We're waiting on, I think it was at least a month or so before an update was going to be provided. Is that
We have reached out to the major, we have talked. And,
Okay.
we'll wait to give a full report, but what we found is similar to what we've already said.
Okay. So we'll keep that here, and then when you're ready to provide an update, you'll let us know. All right. That closes for future action and moves us into board committee reports and Board of Education bulletins. Item A is the board committee assignments. Everyone should have in front of them a document for the 2019 committee assignments. I want to first of all thank everybody for their timely review on this and providing feedback and information back so that this can be pulled together. And I guess I'll open it up if there's any comments or final thoughts before we finalize this and move forward. I guess one thing in saying that before we do that, the executive committee, my thought here, and I did talk with Ms. Reed about it as well, was that we would set that up with we're looking at the executive committee at this point as meeting on an as-needed basis based on an emerging issue or a significant issue that is arising within the district that needs that either the superintendent or one of the assistant superintendents or a board member says, hey, this is something that we need to put immediate attention to and requires some engagement. And with that in mind, and there being that there's 4 officers, but yet we can't meet as 4 without having a quorum, that we would, based on availability, would determine who engages. I myself travel a fair amount, so I know that there certainly would be times where I wouldn't be necessarily available, and vice versa with other members. So that was the general thought with that committee, and it was one that will not meet on a monthly basis, but rather just as needed. And when they do pull together, the expectation would be that there would be some form of communication back to the rest of the board for transparency and an update on what the reasoning for meeting and the purpose and the next steps. So Any comments, concerns, reservations with that thought? Okay, and then the bond committee, I know at least probably in the next month or two, maybe not so much, maybe a once a month type of committee, or bonding facilities, but I fully anticipate that that's going to be a committee that's going to need to be meeting probably much more frequently than even potentially twice a month in the future. So
We have one scheduled for tomorrow. Should I forego that meeting, or do you have something to discuss?
I have nothing new personally.
The only thing was the, bring forward the
Company.
company,
That's right.
which they're booked, though, they're full. But I think there's still another company out there that we can utilize, and this is a, it's like help pass by, they do polling and things like that, for helping pass by. It's not necessarily a vote yes committee, but it's a polling and that kind of thing to tell us where it's at. So,
We want to get together tomorrow and talk about that.
well,
I'd have to call the other company to see if they're available.
well, that would be the, yeah, that would be the thing, but
I think it's premature. So,
well,
okay.
I guess my point is, because, well, in my opinion, sooner the better, because the other company's already out, because they're booked for November. So, I don't know what the appetite is with that, so.
You want to give a call and let us know what their availability is, and then we'll set the next meeting based on that?
Yeah. Fine.
So tomorrow's meeting is canceled.
I'll send an email.
How about that?
Pretty easy meeting.
Any other thoughts or comments, obviously front and back, with what is presented here?
I do have one idea that I wanted to throw out there for everybody. You know, since this is a slightly different structure for the topics of the committees and what we're doing, should we memorialize this as part of board policy? Is there some other place that we should put this? So next year we remember why we did it this way, and we can think through whether we want to keep it this way or change it to something else? Or is that level of formality not needed?
So usually I just keep this in a file on my computer, and then when we elect new officers, I provide it to usually the president, and then they kind of go over it. But it's, if you want to do something different, we could.
Ever since I've been on the board, this has been the way that
That we assign
it's
things, yeah.
been
Yeah.
done. So again,
Okay.
I think it has, I'm just in reflection of the last 2 years or 3 years maybe, I think it has, we've made progress in tightening it up a little bit. I know even this year with the SILK committee, the School Improvement Learning Committee, I think, there were several of us on board even this year that were asking, what is that, what's SILK? So, we've got that captured now, and I think we're getting a little bit more purposeful with assigning advisory reps on the Health Advisory Committee, which we did have, but the Safety and Security Committee and even revising and refining some of the board committees themselves, but.
well, yeah, now I was gonna say, prior, we never had a finance or a policy committee like that.
We had a finance committee last year.
No, I'm talking prior to that. There was never those, we never even had, per se, a committee structure like that.
Sure.
I think the closest was the
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the Whole in the back of the room, which wasn't really anywhere near this type of structure.
Yeah.
So, in talking about, now going back and memorializing, if in my opinion, this seems to work better than that. Now, again, maybe it's to make it forward, maybe whatever. But, you know, if this is the way it would proceed moving forward, and other boards would go along with it, maybe it is with some type of.
Well,
So there was a committee structure like this prior to committee of the whole. So the district, probably 14 years ago, had a finance committee, had a HR committee, had a facility committee. And then there was some angst about what was going on in the committees, and some angst that tied to bargaining. And then those committees went away, and there was an ask for more transparency. So 10 years ago, we started the committee of a whole for the transparency, because all 7 of us, all 7 of you and us, sat at the back table and just flat out discussed the issues. And then the bond committee really kind of pushed this as well, because that was a separate committee, and then it lent itself to a finance and an HR policy committee. So it switched 3 times, twice since I've been here, but 3 times just prior to. So I think it ebbs and flows depending on the situation.
well, I think sometimes, some of this is gonna be fluid anyway, because,
Sure.
I mean, in 2 years, there probably won't be a bond committee. I mean, this year, obviously, the bond committee will have a lot of work in anticipation and in connection with the bond, or the election, and then if it passes, then next year there'll be obviously a need for a committee to, you know, the implementation of, right.
Right.
But then beyond that, you know, we probably won't need that, you know, that particular committee, and maybe there'll be a reconstitution of, you know, which groups are affiliated with which committees and.
Preparing for a bond and implementing a bond are 2 totally different jobs.
Oh, sure.
So the committee even changed from 2012. So 2011 was when we were preparing for the vote on the bond. 2012 passes, and that committee changed dramatically and you're exactly right, into the implementation phase. So it was at least a weekly meeting, sometimes twice a week, depending on what we were. As we got closer to summer, as we got closer to the breaking of the ground, it was twice.
I just had to check, because I'm getting older. The facility committee set up for the 5th, so that might still add a different meeting.
Yeah, because I didn't see it on my calendar for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
set up for the 5th.
February, yeah.
So next week.
Yeah, the following week, so it might still work.
So we're keeping,
I'll still make the call tomorrow, just so we know.
Yeah.
So one of my thoughts in memorializing some of the structure in board level policy or some other document is to make sure that we have transparency, so that if anybody wanted to know how we run the business of the school board, it would be easy for them to figure that out, and maybe have a place to set expectations or standards for what work those committees will do and how it's reported back to the board, or minutes kept and memorialized for the public to see what it is we're doing. Because I, like Ms. Mosier, I like systems. And I want this to be, if it works, I would like for it to be easily repeatable for the next board, but still flexible enough to deal with the different subject matters that we may need to cover and the different places we may need to put more focus at different times. So if I, you know, on the back of the napkin here, I'm thinking we have something that officially says our executive committee is any 3 of the 4 officers meeting ad hoc as requested by the superintendent or the administration to deal with board level questions that need immediate attention in between board meetings or something like that. And then everything else would be decided by the board at the organizational meeting annually with, I don't know, standards for whether we keep minutes, where those minutes are kept by the administration so that they're accessible by anybody else, how we set agendas. I don't know how much process we want to put around this, but I'm imagining some bullet points that would at least give us a standard structure so that we're all doing the same thing, and it's easy for folks to know what it is we're up to.
I certainly like the minutes idea, at least having some type of standard,
Yeah.
right, to fill out.
And and that's, you know, this is the checklist, here's your agenda, these are the things that we covered,
Right.
these are the people that were there.
But I'm assuming that in that would be adaptable.
I think that would be valuable, and I'm, you know, since I'm gonna be running the policy committee, I'll certainly put something together and ask the fellow committee members what they think of it, and we'll bring it back to the board and see what you think.
That's good music right there.
Yeah, there you go, there you go.
I like it. I mean, I'm a big fan of memorializing things. I think it makes it easier for everybody as well. In future state, you know, if we look down the road 8 years from now, people are gonna look at this and not have any context of where we were and why we did what we did, or other than say,
Right.
this is interesting. Another thought I have, Ms. Ackmite, could you put this up on the website so, in the context of transparency, excuse me, that, so that this is up and people can see, the board committees and what, you know, when they meet, and maybe that's where we put minutes, and just thinking that.
Yeah.
So the one question I have is that I'm interested in a couple of the issues with the health advisory committee, so I'd like to attend a few of those meetings. Even though I'm not a board member of the field trip, can I still attend those meetings? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not. That's what I'm saying.
Four will show up, that's, yeah.
Well, hold on, that's a misnomer, okay? Because if you're not voting on anything,
That's true, that's true.
it doesn't make any difference. You can have four there as long as the conversation is in regards to policy and voting and things like that. I mean, it's just safer not to, but it doesn't prohibit you from not.
I would ask our friends at Fern what they think of that, especially for something like if we're thinking specifically about the health advisory committee. They do vote on things that then come to the board for review and approval. That might be too close to the line and might call into question whether it's.
Well, what they're gonna say, it's what I would tell my clients is, you know, if there's a risk that somebody might perceive, then by having, you're inviting a potential issue that doesn't otherwise need to exist. So even if, to follow on Ms. Reed's point, I mean, even if technically the board isn't voting,
Right.
you know, if there's a perception, and then that becomes an issue, then it's something that the board or the district has to defend against. And so it probably is prudent to avoid having four at any given meeting. So, but we're at two now, right?
So 3 would be.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there, I guess the other question with this and bringing this to finalization is, obviously the board committees will be driven off of a coordination amongst the board members on calendar dates, but on the advisory committees, or for the advisory representatives, are those, can we get a Google Calendar invite or some kind of calendar invite on these so that we can get those solidified on our calendars?
I'll speak for mine, I have no problem with that. That's
Okay.
exactly what I do. I saw that Dr. Krebs and Ms. Mitchell were on that, so I would just invite them and let them know the dates of the meeting, so they can.
Okay. Dr. Gray, is that something you could maybe get set up for us on or Star or somebody on the health advisory and the safety and security?
Just send it, please.
Okay.
Henry does have it, that's for
Does he?
health
Okay.
advisory. Yeah.
Okay.
I think linking the minutes to it is a really good idea too. So all our past committees, I created minutes, scanned them, and I put them in a folder. So moving forward, we could formalize that even more.
Okay.
There's a very low standard of that, but we want to exceed that.
And then the safety security, somebody will send as well. The
I think Henry runs
calendar
that.
Yeah, Henry
invites.
runs that.
He runs that too and
Yeah.
sends it, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then lastly, Ms. Hackermite, if you can send me the LCA SB meeting date, I think it's in May, but I don't know when that exactly is, so I'll put that on my calendar too, please. questions, concerns, complaints, criticisms? Higher? Speak now or otherwise, please. All right, cool. Item B is the district priorities for 2019. Also another document that you have in front of you and was sent out for review. And my thought tonight on this is to at least get us to a point where we're starting to, as you can see, we've got probably 20 or so items on here, and these were all items that were developed at the board workshop in early January. But now we're at the stage of having to start to prioritize, where we think these fall in line with our 2019 and even in the 2020 priorities. And then I think future or further from that, we're going to have to start diving into just some of the context of each of these and what that means and where some of these belong and ownership and timelines and those types of things. I certainly understand we're not going to cover all of that necessarily tonight, but I want to at least try to hopefully get somewhat of a start on getting this into some order of semblance. Thoughts?
Well, in my opinion, again, us sitting here as a board, I know we were the ones that came up with these topics. But I'm not so sure necessarily we need to organize and put them in the right buckets. I'd much rather see the administration or someone there put them in the buckets, bring it back to us for recommendations. And then from there, if they need to be moved or rearranged, we can do that. But again, I'd much rather see that take place because we can sit up here or put all the thought in the world for some logical reason or non-logical reason. We may completely miss the boat. I don't know where, because again, it's not a day-to-day thing that we're dealing with, like the administration is. So I'd much rather see them take the first attempt to put it in the right spot.
I guess from my perspective, as I know we talked about this document obviously arose as a result of our workshop. And, we talked about all these topics and to some of them to different degrees. I guess my question ultimately in my mind is what are we going to use this for? What is the specific purpose for this document? Because, obviously, for example, we have shared services that all as a priority. Shared services and the funding that we get from shared services and the impact to the programming of our district, that's high on the priority, I think, for everyone all the time. It's not like that's something that we need to really focus in on 2019. The bond is that's going to take in a significant amount of time, and that's a major issue that is going to involve, really everyone at this table to different degrees, and obviously the administration. How does that, by including that on this list, impact what we're doing going forward? So I guess that's my question: is what are we hoping to achieve by finalizing this document? Because I think that's going to be, important for how we ultimately do finalize this document. Whether we are going to rank them in priority, what the administration is going to do with that. I guess that's my concern is there's a lot, all these things are important to some degree or another. We all talked about it, but how is that going to frame what we're going to do going forward depending on how this document gets revised and finalized? I think that's a fundamental question that I have on this.
If I could propose something, because I think, we've got a mix of things on this list that are things we have to do and some things that we want to do. And I almost feel like we need to separate those two things. We have to finish the science implementation. We have to finish the implementation of the early literacy programs to deal with our new statutory obligations. We have to bargain contracts this year.
we have to have clean schools.
Those things they just have to get done. So my question then becomes, if our administration finds themselves with time and resources to spare, where do we want them to investigate putting that time and those resources? Can we as a board come up with 5 things that if there is extra effort we can expend, where do we want our administrators to consider spending that effort? Still, we are obviously looking to our wonderful administration to tell us where they think the best use of those resources would be. But if we can provide some guiding principles about the things that we think are important to our district and maybe not part of the day-to-day plan already, that I think is a role that the board should play.
So do we break this as a board into needs and wants? And prioritize those?
Kind of, yeah.
Or is that something we can do, you know, not here, but everybody maybe put their thoughts to it and then send the results to either Andy or something to have, you know, well, this appears to be the, you know, the majority of the needs, the majority of the wants, compile a list that way.
Well, I mean, would that be helpful, Dr. Gray? I mean, would that be useful, or are we just spinning our wheels up here?
You know, I think most of these items would come up most every year in terms of this. I think we are constantly looking at a large majority of these. I would agree with Roger in terms of the bond. It's just a different animal as it comes up. I think what we're talking about here is goals for 1920. It kind of lends itself to, you know, what are the things we're going to focus on. I think we can also use the feedback from the survey we just sent out to see if the community also believes that it envelops itself into these categories, which I'm guessing it will, because there will be comments and there will be feedback in relation to those types of things on that. I think that'll help us whittle it down. I think the idea of things we have to do, things we want to do is a good idea. I think we have a strategic plan already in place for another 1.5 years that we should probably review to see if there are any things from this list that can fit into categories or are already categories in the strategic plan that we're presently working on. So I think if we cross-reference them against those 3 things, I think we'll have the document that we need. All this stuff makes sense in terms of that. It'll be just prioritizing that list. Some of them just happen. You know, shared service is going to keep happening, otherwise that's not good. Some of the other ones are bigger, longer-term growth projects. Community college, that's one. Some of them we work on a daily basis. Special ed, social, emotional, district safety, security, cleanliness. So those are different. So I think you guys could take a whack at this document. I think we could take a whack at this document. I think for me, I could prioritize this very quickly, but I also want to look at the surveys that come back from students, staff, and parents to see how those align with this. I can guess from what we've seen the last 10 years doing that same survey, but and then again, I'd like to cross-reference it against our present strategic plan.
When's our survey? When's the survey?
It's the end of February.
End of February?
Yep. We typically end it in February. We compile the results in March. The boards typically have a workshop in June. We have a administrative retreat typically in June. So if we had a board workshop in May and screen this list, what I typically do is take stuff from the workshop to the administrative retreat, and we start to build our business plans for 1920 or whatever year based on that particular retreat.
I like the idea of, you know, obviously cross-referencing the survey results and what we see, but I also don't think some of this we want to wait until that you know, June, July period of time.
Some of it can't wait. Some of it's
Right.
happening. Some of it's happening right now.
Exactly.
The bond has to go.
Right.
You know, those things have to happen. Bargaining has to happen.
Mr. Myers, based on what has transpired since your comments, are you feeling like this is directing in a a space that you're comfortable with, like, to hit on what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, trying to get a sense of how we have this, what we're gonna use it as a tool for, because some of these priorities are just unattainable, like the community college. And that's not gonna happen in 2019. Hopefully that process will continue in earnest, but there's so many pieces that are gonna have to come to fruition down the road, that, I mean, it's just an impossibility. So, and then conversely, like the bond and shared services and some social emotional, these things are happening daily. So it just seemed like we, you know, while these topics are all important and were identified as part of our strategic planning discussions, I'm trying to figure out how we lump them all into one document and how that forms a guide for how we're moving forward, right? That's basically what I'm doing. So.
Let me ask you a question, Roger. Just as you were talking about, your name's next to the community college. So, and again, I know Alicia's name is next to the busing, which I think is probably something that she's passionate about. And I believe probably you're the same way with the community college, just like I am with the custodial stuff, even though it's low on the scale compared to the busing in the community college. So, you know, I guess, in my opinion, I'm going to continue to make every effort to make sure we have custodial staff and they're doing the work that they're supposed to do when you walk into school and you see it, right? And that's going to be kind of something that, as we progress, I'm going to continue to watch that, and I think you're probably going to sit down and talk to Dr. Gray, I'm assuming, about the busing and maybe go through some scenarios to see how it could improve, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm assuming from a community college standpoint, there's going to be some more input somewhere along the lines, somehow or another, or some offer, which I would think probably, Roger, that come from you if that's something that you're interested in, which your names have to be plugged in here, right?
Well, I think that just, because of that issue.
I know that,
because like with bond, it just says Birchfield. I think probably all of us have a really vested interest in that. See, that's my point.
We're in trouble if we don't.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right.
Yeah, the name is assigned to the person that brought it up.
Right.
In the workshop, not ownership.
But again, I don't see just because, you know, we said we hired 2 janitors, I'm not going to take that as the solution to fits all. Okay, at least from my standpoint. And again, I don't know, you know, if we buy 3 more buses, is that solve the problem? So.
Well, I will be honest, you know, when I approached this discussion at the board retreat and was thinking about the things that I would throw out there for consideration, I was hoping that we could come to, as a board, we would be able to come to a consensus about what those priorities would be, so it was less of all of our pet projects thrown at Dr. Gray at random times, right? So that he would know it's not just me that cares about the buses. He knows that we all care about making changes or think that's an important use of his time rather than running him ragged with all of the pet projects that I might come up with.
But didn't we already vet this list?
I don't think we did. I
From
mean, we
that
just kind
standpoint?
of, we threw it all out there and discussed why they were important, but I don't think we set any level of priority to it. So
Okay,
when I,
no level of priority, but, I mean, everybody, I think, on this board agrees. I don't see one topic on here that I think should come off. From being a board member, right? I mean, I think we all agree that these are pretty significant topics that should be addressed.
Yeah, I think I agree, but I also think that priority-wise, I mean, let's be realistic. We're not going to tackle. We're not going to accomplish every single thing on this list. So therefore, thinking about this in the space of 2019, what is it that I like the way Ms. Reed has actually framed it. What is the things we have to do versus the things we want to do, and then begin to put some context behind that. What does it mean? And then as we start to tackle it, these are gonna be, if there was, at the end of the year, last meeting in December, if we were to pull this back out and say, all right, what did we accomplish? Did we meet the objectives of these three things we made progress on? And that's, is that a measurement of success?
And even, within each of these topics, like I threw out special education services, we have to provide adequate special education sources. So it's not really fair to say that that's a priority because we have to do that. The question is, as a board, do we feel like we need to explore doing anything more than we do today? Do we need to find additional resources, additional staff, do we see something more and would we like to make it a priority to determine if anything more is needed? At least that's what I had in mind.
Really, every one of these topics, we should come up with, okay, here's bargaining, what are our goals in bargaining this year? What do we want to attain, and how are we going to reach them? Every one of them, we've had that. I think these are all priorities, but we have to come up with what is it, and then we have to look back and say, what did we do? In 6 months, have we done anything on it yet? Did we do what we said we were going to do? Because just as a topic, it's so general, we could spend the entire year on one of them if we wanted to. Right.
Sure.
Yeah, what poll are we chasing now?
When's our next board retreat scheduled for?
That's a good question. I actually had that. Do we know when the next board retreat is scheduled for, board workshop?
No, I wanted to get with you and get some dates.
Okay.
Probably March. I
Okay.
was thinking in March, we have one board meeting, so.
So maybe
some
let's
dates.
get a doodle poll out
Yeah.
maybe and see if we can get something nailed down for March. That'd be good.
Okay.
I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, if I'm willing to take another stab at this, break it up into things we have to do, things we want to do, try to provide a little bit more context behind each one, whether that's bulleted out or a quick sentence, and then maybe send it to the administration, have them put their feedback in, and then share it back out to the rest of the board, and then everybody can react to that.
Yeah,
And then we
that'd
can
be
bring
about
it
the time of our retreat.
and then we can bring it forward to, early March sometime. Is that,
It'll give us a framework to
Right.
discuss it further in the retreat.
Since we have it on here, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to ask a question on something. The replacement of administration and HR positions. The current HR position, where do we stand on it right now?
1 more week of posting, and then we'll have a pool of candidates, we'll screen them, and then screen the candidates, and then we'll go from there.
Have we had anyone inside our own?
I haven't even
school
looked.
district?
Since we posted it, I haven't even looked.
Okay, and they do get those postings, correct?
Yeah, it goes like this.
Because I guess I just want to look at it, because we've got some people that, I'm not going to name any names, we all know who they are, that are looking at retirement soon or something like that. Maybe some of these people would be a good fit for some of these if they knew that we were looking at them. And I don't know if, you can't really say we're going to, and I wouldn't suggest that we're going to say, well, we want this person from our district. But I think I want them to know that they're going to get the consideration, and that we would hire from a district if they were the right person. Because I've talked to few, and they're like, oh yeah, I might be interested in that, but I don't know where I would fit into that. So just something, food for thought to think about, and I would like to see when we get that list, if any of them have applied, and we can't make them apply, but I'm just curious if they realize. It kind of comes from personal. My wife's school district, they hired from outside the district for so long that people inside their district have kind of gotten to the point where they're not even going to try because it seems like they don't want any of them. It causes chaos in the school district and morale goes down. So I would like to see a way to let our staff know that we'd like to see them apply. Just a thought. It's not pretty in the class, but.
all right,
That's all. Thanks for looking through that.
Oh, yeah. Any other thoughts, feedback on this? I think we got a plan to keep the needle moving. All right, and we'll see a doodle poll at some point in the near future for board workshop in March.
So we don't do anything with this until I get the initial one.
I'm gonna try to reframe this in some capacity.
And we'll add to it.
And then I'll send to you, and then you can work with your team, and then I'll take that back to the board, and then
Got it.
we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Board committee reports, Board of Education bulletins?
Total plunge on Saturday. I don't know if anybody went to it or not, but it was
Cold.
rainy, bad, and cold. And Brighton had a team in there that jumped, so did very good. Links and some of the kids went, so.
Did you do it?
No, but here's what I did offer. The board would challenge the teachers union next year for fundraising.
To jump in.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in. I'll do that. Heck yeah.
so.
It's just the seven of them.
Some Star Wars is all, it's just the 7 of you or all of us?
No, I took the board.
That's I would jump the pool in a suit. I'm in. Sandy, let's go.
I know you, yeah.
10 years ago, I would have been game. I don't know. I'm starting to think a little differently now.
Just make sure my life insurance is way high.
The pacemaker's turned off.
You gotta double click. Exactly.
One thing I'll throw out there is I stopped by the pool on Sunday. Exorbitant amount of cars at the parking lot. They had their kayak. I guess it was cold and they all wanted to come in and get in their kayaks, but it's a huge program. A lot of people involved. It's amazing what they're all teaching them and that staff there. There had to be, I didn't count, but I'm sure to say there were 60 people there to do that.
Yoga
It's
fits.
a heck of a program. They use it.
Our water yoga's taken off too. Yeah. So that's been encouraged.
Good.
Our sprint and swim team had a great season this year.
Yes, it is.
Undefeated.
Yeah, so they great. We've got such wonderful coaches. I hope we can keep Coach Link interested longer because he's great with the kids.
Selfishly, hopefully that talent's coming up to the swim team next year.
I would agree. We need 3 more points.
3 more points.
That's all we need.
All right, anything else? Okay, our next board meeting is Monday, February 11th, 2019 at 7 o'clock. And this meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.